Every great tragedy begins with a single, deliberate act of malice. For the House of Inugami, giants of Japan's pharmaceutical world, that act was a document. The last will and testament of Seishi Inugami, patriarch, feudal relic, and tyrant. He was a man who had acquired everything but the one thing he craved most, a legitimate heir. He never married. His only child, Aonuma Shizuma, was born from his one true love, a woman of low birth whom he could never publicly claim. Instead, Seishi adopted 3 grandnieces, Matsuko, Takeko, and Umeko, as surrogate daughters, along with their respective sons. But in truth, he saw them as imposters, bitter reminders of his failure to produce a rightful heir. And so, on his deathbed, Seishi did not write a will. He forged a weapon, aimed directly at the heart of his own bloodline. He named as sole inheritor of the entire Inugami fortune, not one of his descendants, but Nonomiya Tamayo, a graceful, intelligent young woman with no Inugami blood. She was the granddaughter of Seishi's greatest benefactor. The family was stunned, but then came the cruel twist. Tamayo could only inherit if she agreed to marry one of the 3 grandsons, Sukekiyo, Suketak, or Suketomo. Seishi had turned his will into a battlefield. The 3 men became suitors. Tamayo, the prize. It was a hunting ground, and she the bait. The family lawyer, Furudate, felt a chill. This was no act of eccentricity. It was a calculated death sentence. And so, with quiet urgency, he reached out to a young detective with rumpled clothes and piercing insight, Kosuke Kindaichi. The first murder struck with theatrical precision. Suketake's body was found decapitated in a storage shed. His severed head, mounted atop a priceless doll, was surrounded by a bed of white chrysanthemums. To the police, it was the work of a madman. But Kindaichi saw a terrible logic. The display was not lunacy, it was ritual. A direct reference to the Kiku, the chrysanthemum, one of the Inugami family's 3 great treasures. A famous painted screen. The killer wasn't improvising. They were staging a death tableau in sacred family language. Kindaichi immediately understood. The murders would follow a pattern. The other 2 treasures, Koto and Yoki, would soon become scripts for more death. But this symbolic horror concealed an even greater trick: time manipulation. When the police found the head, the body was missing, and it remained missing for over 24 hours. This wasn't an oversight. It was the killer's surgical tool. By delaying discovery, the precise medical estimation of time of death was obliterated. In that fog of ambiguity, Matsuko Inugami built her alibi. On the night authorities believed Suketake had been killed, Matsuko was seen calmly playing Go with Furudate, the family lawyer, presenting herself as a matriarch in mourning. Her alibi was solid, because the murder had occurred a full day earlier. By the time anyone noticed the body was missing, she was already covered by an ironclad timeline. The head in the shed was a symbol. The missing body? A masterstroke. A way to break the clock. The second murder followed swiftly, and with a chilling sense of ritual. Suketomo was found at the bottom of Lake Inugami, legs jutting stiffly toward the surface like grotesque fingers. Again, the police were baffled. Again, Kindaichi understood. This was the Koto, the second Inugami treasure, a classical string instrument with high bridges for the strings. Suketomo's legs, frozen in rigor mortis, mimicked the instrument's form. The staging was perfect. The message was deliberate, but symbolism was only the mask. The real brilliance, once again, lay in the manipulation of time. By placing the body in the lake, the killer had weaponized the environment itself. The cold water slowed decomposition dramatically. Forensic medicine could offer no help. Was the death 12 hours ago? Or 3 days ago? No one could say. the timeline collapsed entirely. This was no longer a fog. It was a void. And in that void, every alibi shattered. No family member could prove where they were or weren't during the undefined window of death. With no reliable time of murder, suspicion became a meaningless exercise. This wasn't just a second death. It was the annihilation of time itself. Amid the unraveling chaos stood a man with a blank face, literally. The returning war veteran, Sukekiyo, wore a rubber mask, claiming that his disfigurement from combat made him unrecognizable. His voice was hushed, his manner distant, and yet the family accepted him without question. Why? Kindaichi peeled back the layers. First, the mask itself was an unsolvable riddle. His face, hidden. No way to confirm or deny his claim. Second, Matsuko publicly and tearfully vouched for him. A mother's word held weight. Third, Tamayo accepted him. As Kindaichi would later uncover, she knew the truth. This was not Sukekiyo, but she loved him. She protected him, not for deception, but for survival. Lastly, the family's wicked pragmatism. They realized it was easier to kill this masked man than to challenge his claim in court. Legally, he stood on equal footing. Violently, he was vulnerable. But the masked man was not after wealth. He was Aonuma Shizuma, Sahai's illegitimate son. A man once cast aside, now returned in another's name. The real Sukekiyo had died in Burma, saving Shizuma's life in battle. With his last breath, Sukekiyo made Shizuma promise to protect Tamayo, the woman he had loved. And so, Shizuma came to honor that promise. Not out of ambition, out of love, out of duty. But in donning that mask, he became a target. Matsuko's plan had been flawless, but perfection is brittle. She had hired a groundskeeper named Yazaki, a brute and a pawn. His job, kidnap one of the remaining grandsons to be used as a backup body in a staged killing, a grotesque insurance policy for Matsuko's plan. But when Yazaki was dispatched to eliminate Shizuma, the unexpected happened. Shizuma, a battle-hardened soldier, defended himself. Yazaki was killed in the struggle. Now, Matsuko's script fell apart. Her pawn was dead. Her imposter was still alive. But Shizuma had become a killer and needed to vanish. And so, the final illusion was crafted. Shizuma took Yazaki's corpse, struck it with the ceremonial yokai axe, the third family treasure, and burned the face beyond recognition. The body was dressed in Shizuma's clothes and left to be found. To the police, it was simple. The masked man was dead, murdered in ritualistic fashion. The trilogy of deaths, Kiku, Koto, Yoki, was complete. The case closed. But Kindaichi saw through the flames. Why burn the face? Not out of rage, not out of panic, but concealment. It wasn't Shizuma's corpse, it was Yazaki's. And that lie, that final flourish of theatrical murder, unraveled the whole conspiracy. In the end, the architect of all this destruction stood quietly among the ruins. Matsuko. Her motive was never greed. It was vengeance. Pure, calculated, and absolute. Her son, the real Sukekiyo, had died far from home. His death did not break her. It transformed her. She blamed the Inugami family, its legacy, its cruelty, its failure to protect the bloodline that mattered most to her. So she decided to destroy it. She orchestrated the deaths of her nephews, each framed as a ritualistic murder echoing the family's treasures. She built flawless alibis by manipulating time, once by hiding a body, once by submerging it. She hired a pawn to carry out the labor she couldn't. And she intended to crown Shizuma, a man with the blood of Sahei's discarded love, on the Inugami throne. A final insult, a poetic revenge. But when her pawn died and Shizuma disappeared, her plan cracked. Yet her intent remained crystal clear. she had painted a canvas of death with the same care Sahe once poured into his empire. The treasures of the house, Kiku, Koto, Yoki, became instruments of annihilation. Not out of madness, but clarity. Not out of ambition, but pain. She was not a criminal seeking profit. She was a mother, wielding hate like a scalpel, a hate so refined it could mimic art.